So this is lesson 2 for the Unit 3 Aperture and ISO. In this lesson, we're going to go over what the expectations are for this project, what the final project should look like, and also the steps that you need to do to make this project successful. So the final product is going to look like this. It's going to be on your Google site. You're going to label it Unit 3 Aperture and ISO. And you are required to do 9 pictures for this assignment. And then there will be an option for a bonus image. The first 6 images are going to be similar to each other. You're going to stage a setting where you have at least 3 objects in a diagonal going back into space. So as you can see, these are pieces of wood going back into space. And each one illustrates a different depth of field using Aperture. And you're going to be using your Aperture priority mode. So this one was used in f3.5. This is a point and shoot example right here, which the lowest or the largest aperture that you could get, which gives you the shallowest depth of field, was 3.5. And as you can see, this foreground right here is significantly out of focus. The medium range one, you can see this one is less out of focus. And then finally, the long range, which gives most of everything in here, is in focus. You can see the difference between these 3 objects right here. You're going to repeat the same thing, just like we did in Unit 2, but with a different object so that you can get some practice. So in this one, I gave an example here with a digital SLR to show you the difference there. This is a shallow depth of field. The camera I was using got all the way down to, or opened all the way up to 1.4. And so you can see this one right here is in focus and the outside here is out of focus. And the medium range was f8. And you can see this is slightly still out of focus, but a little bit more information is visible here. And then finally with the long depth of field, everything is in focus. It's going to be advisable that you choose an object that maybe has writing on it, because that is a really good indicator whether or not something is in or out of focus. And then the third step here is to just do a simple photograph of another object, and you're going to do 3 different ISOs, ISO 100, ISO 400, and ISO 1600. These are common ISO settings you will be using in the beginning photography and probably throughout your career. Typically, you won't be going much over 1600 because you do lose a lot of quality. And what I want you to do is when you look at these, you're going to get up close. And it's really hard to see on this website right here, but this one has finer detail. And the more you go up here, if you could get in close, you can see it's actually grainier. It's going to be easier for you to see on your screen of your Chromebook or of your camera. So make sure before you upload these that you kind of take a closer look to see. It is very difficult to kind of see in this setting. And then finally, for fun, if you want to, you can do a bonus image. I would love for you to go outside at night and set your ISO to a high ISO. That means 1600 or higher. And go into your yard or outside with the street lights and try taking a picture using ISO only. Don't use a flash. Just use a high ISO and see what kind of image you can get. And try doing it without a tripod and see what your images can look like. It's just for fun, and it's just a good way to experiment with high ISO. So let's take a look at different ways that students in the past have visualized this project. You saw my examples using lotion bottles or using the pieces of wood. Here's some creative uses from other students. They used 3 sets of people's feet is one idea. And here was marbles going back into space. And then for the ISO setting here, this photographer just did an outdoor scene. And this next example was done in my classroom. using glaze, which you can see the text on here and you can see the effects behind it. And again, here with the cups. And then for the ISO, they just use one water cup here. This one was really creative. It used lights going back into space. So you could have these in your bedroom or at home that as long as they go back into space, you can see the depth and that will work. And lockers are really good because you can see a short depth of field here and then all the way down to a long depth of field. And then for this example, it looks like some kind of trinket inside of her room. This one used a lineup of the orchestra. This is in the orchestra room. So several different cellos lining up against the wall, and you can see the short depth of field is really visible. You have to have things that are going back into space. And this student, makeup was really important to her, and she photographed different makeup products that she had, and then set up a scene outside of a plant that she had. And then this is one example of something that you could do. She set her ISO to 1600 at night, was hand holding it, and this is the image that she got. So this is something similar to what you can do. Okay, for this, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Canon camera simulator online to teach us how we can use the smartphone to be able to take pictures. So let's look at, and this link should be for you in Google Classroom. And we've looked at the manual setting, and last unit we used a shutter priority mode. And this unit we're going to be looking at aperture priority because that's what's going to be our priority at the beginning. So what I want you to do is, we're going to do a simulation with the highest and lowest range that we can get on this simulator. So come all the way down for aperture, and we're going to go to f2.8. And notice right here, it turns off your ISO to an automatic setting for you. It also automatically sets your shutter speed. And we're going to take a look at a picture like this. Okay, so we see this picture. In it, you have a very blurry foreground, a very blurry background. And in the middle ground right here, you get your single line of focus all the way across. So this marble and this, the wheels of this plane are in focus, but everything else is out of focus. That's what a very shallow depth of field will give you. Okay. So now let's go to a middle range and take a look at what that looks like. Let's go to F8 and take a picture. Okay, we see some blur up here. We see some blur back here, but things are starting to come out and be a little bit more visible. And that's what you're going to get with the medium range. And now finally, we're going to take a picture at the highest or the smallest f-stop, which is f22. And let's take a picture. Notice that it puts everything in focus. So I want you to play around with this before we get started in the next tutorial. So the smartphone is a little bit tricky because it does not have aperture in the setting. In the settings, it has no capability of changing the aperture size in the smartphone. So we have to kind of do a little bit of a workaround when it comes to using the smartphone. So our first three pictures, we're going to actually create using this simulator. So you go to canonoutsideofauto.ca/play, and the link is in Google Classroom. And we're going to use this simulator for your first three pictures, and then the second three pictures you're going to manipulate using your smartphone, and the third group of pictures you're going to be using for your smartphone as well. So just like we did before, you're going to come here and go to aperture setting, and you're going to move all the way down to 2.8, and you're going to take the picture. And notice that it is a really shallow depth of field at 2.8. You're going to right click, and for the Chromebook, right click is actually 2 fingers. So I right click, I'm going to save this image. And I'm not sure exactly what will pop up for you in the Chromebook. I'm just going to save mine to the desktop, and I'm going to call this Aperture F 2.8 shallow. So I remember that this is a shallow depth of field, and I'm going to click Save. I'm done with that picture. It's saved down here. It's also saved onto my desktop. Next, I'm going to move it to F8. And I'm going to take the picture again. Notice a little bit more comes into focus. Right click. Whoops, sorry. Right click, save image as. And again, we're going to do the same thing, but this time it's going to be Aperture F8. And this is, sorry, it's going to be medium. This is a medium range. And save. Okay. My next one is going to be all the way to the top. Long depth of field, F22. Take the picture. Right click, save image as. Notice everything is in focus. So each of these pictures should look different. We're going to call this Aperture F22 long because it's a long depth of field. And I'm going to save this on my desktop too. So now I've saved all three of these to my desktop. I'm going to be ready to present them on my Google Sites. The next step, we're going to be working with your smartphone. All right, everyone, for this one, we are using a smartphone. We've already used the simulator, and what I've done is I set up a scene near a window light. It's starting to get a little bit darker out right now, but we'll see if this is going to work for us. We are going to practice how we can create the illusion of aperture using a smartphone. So as you can see, my Google Pixel loves to do some shaky focus. But what we're going to do is I'm in the regular camera app for this one because the manual camera app does not have the settings for changing the illusion of aperture. I'm going to go ahead and work just with my regular camera app. So go ahead and turn on your camera app. Give yourself a horizontal composition and set yourself down on the table. And set your center piece right in the middle. That's where you're going to be focusing. And then set your one that's in the foreground as far up as you can. And then the one in the background can stay back here. And we're going to see what kind of effects we can get here. All right, the attempt that you're going to try to make is try to get the illusion of long depth of field and short depth of field. As I can see here, I'm trying just my regular camera app, and I need to pull it back just a little bit. That was a little bit too close. Now you can see pretty much everything in my camera is in focus. So I'm going to go ahead and take this picture. All right, now I want to try something fun. So I'm going to do my lens blur. You might have something called portrait mode or something like that that you could use this with. And I'm going to try a little bit of a lens blur to see if I can create an illusion here. I moved my device too fast. Okay, and let's see what that picture turned out like. It's processing. So just as this one is processing, you can see here the lens blur finally came through, and the object on the left is significantly out of focus, the object on the right is significantly out of focus, and the object in the middle is in focus. So you all are not going to be capable of doing a 3 pictures, a long, shallow, and medium. So I am okay with you just turning in 2. One with a significant amount of blur, and one with a, and let's go back to the other picture. Photos. Oops. Here we go. One with a long depth of field, which shows everything in focus, and one with a blur like this. So only 2 images for your second set of pictures. So now let's go back to our camera, our manual camera app. So I'm going to go to ProCam, and this time I'm going to choose a different composition, and I'm going to choose my fancy shoe. So here's my fancy shoe, and I'm going to see what the ISO features will look like on this. Right now this is a very dark picture, and that's okay. So I'm going to play with ISO. So I'm going to start with the lowest ISO I can go, which is 50 on my camera. Notice how dark that makes it. So in order to compensate for that, I need to go up to shutter, and I need to open up my shutter until I get a pretty light picture, and I'm going to focus. This is my ISO 50. Hopefully your camera looks better than mine. ISO 50. Take a picture when you get the lighting to be just right. Okay, now I'm going to change my ISO to a medium range one. I'm going to change mine to 400 and change my shutter speed until I get it to the right darkness. I like it. Now your lowest ISO might be 100, and that's fine. Now I'm doing ISO 400 for my second picture. Take a picture. Okay, and then finally I'm going to do 1600. Typically you won't be using anything more than 1600. Change my shutter speed until it looks the right brightness. There we go. And take my picture. Wow, and that one really messed up the focus there. So I'm going to reshoot that one. I'm not sure what happened there, so I'm going to try. That's kind of interesting, right? What's up with that? You know, I've been having some serious issues with my camera wanting to focus. So hopefully you have better opportunities than I do for your focus. Let's try that again. Okay. So now that I've got my 3 pictures, I have my 3 ISO and I have my 2 of Aperture. I'm going to be uploading those 2.